Hello, everyone. We have an exciting show planned. We have a very special guest, longtime friend of the show, Joe Camo from the Cardinal Rule, will be joining us right after this. Welcome, Joe Camo of the Cardinal Rule. It's been too long since you've been on. You've been on a few times.
It really has, but it's really good to be with you again, Josh, and talk NFL football. And I think there's some intersection between our interests that we will probably get into today. So I'm looking forward to it, my friend.
Yes. So for those of you who don't know, and I do see we already have, I know he came from your channel, fan favorite of ours as well. Silver Wolf is already here, saying let's go. But what is your channel about? What do you guys do over there at the Cardinal Rule?
Yeah, so I've been a Cardinals fan. Really, I mean, I've old enough that I remember when they moved to Arizona. I wasn't deeply into football then, but I knew of them. I followed them a little bit, and as I got into football, they were obviously my hometown team. So I've been a fan forever. And I moved away from Arizona. I work as a professor live in the state of Georgia. So I'm away from my home fan base, and I've been wanting to just be connected with them. So I started a YouTube channel a while back talking about Arizona Cardinals, and was fortunate that some people liked what I did. Enough people watched and subscribed that built up kind of a really nice community of people, like-minded Cardinals fans that enjoy my content. In recent years, I've kind of taken a step back. We were talking about this before show, just such a news cycle driven for, kind of type of content that you have to keep putting stuff out all the time to keep it going. And I just didn't have the time and energy to commit to that. But my channel, over the years, I've kind of met some really great folks. So I've got a couple podcasts that are running on my channel, the Redbird Reboot and Bird and Goal, with some folks that I've got to know over the years. And so they run on my channel. So it's very much like this live stream podcast, and I jump on as a guest. And we have other things that we do from time to time. So, just folks who love the Arizona Cardinals, talking Arizona Cardinals football. And it's been a joy to get to meet folks like you and get to talk football with fans from other fan bases and people who cover teams in general. And just do what we all do, what we love doing, talking football about the teams we're interested in.
Yeah. It's always so much fun to have people on these shows and talk and learn about teams that you don't necessarily get to follow as often. Like, I try my best to follow each team, but there's so many like little stuff. Like, I don't know who your third string punt returner is or something like, that. But you guys do such a great job over at the Cardinal Rule. I strongly suggest anyone who hasn't yet, go over there and subscribe so that you don't miss any of their content. But before we hopped on here, you and I were talking a little bit, and you were talking about the kind of best spot for coaches to go. And we've talked about this a little bit on the show before. And you were saying that the Cardinals are not well ranked among best spots for a new candidate to go, or really any head coaching candidate. And you wanted to kind of compare them to the Cleveland Browns, this kind of quintessential bad place, the mistake on the lake. And I was higher on the Cleveland Browns than a lot of people. I still am, which I'm a Bengals fan, and that hurts me to say, but it's true. So do you want to kind of make your points first and introduce your argument?
Yeah, well, I think what we'll do is let me set up kind of why I suggest we talk about this, and then maybe we can go point by point, and I'm happy to go first or second. It doesn't matter. But someone who follows the Cardinals, Howard Balzer, who writes about them, has for a long time. He's a veteran of local kind of Cardinals content. Tweeted out something about a poll that was done by kind of, I think, coaches from organizations or executives or someone, I forget who it was, that are with teams that do not have a job opening, ranking the job openings, right, by destination. And the Cardinals came in dead last in that poll. The Raiders were second to last, and the Browns were third to last. And, this is a poll of people in the league, so you don't have to agree with it, but this is not just one person's opinion, right? There's some sort of validity to those perceptions by people who work in the league and know these teams, right? And Cardinals fans, because we're all fans, right? And Cardinals fans have kind of pushed back on that, like thinking that because we're all biased towards our own team, and like, say, hey, we're not the worst job in the league, and even though the Raiders came in second to last, what I've seen in the comments most often, people pointing to the Browns job as a job that's worse than ours. So that, even though they were the third worst in the poll, that's the one that is kind of the comparison. And as you talk about, like, everyone kind of dumps on the Browns, and it's become cliche. You talk smack about the Browns, dump on them, right? But I thought it would be interesting to compare them point by point, looking at the quarterback, the roster, the ownership, and other situations, and compare, which one is worse. And I'm not necessarily challenged. I think it's fair to put the Cardinals near the bottom, if not the bottom, as much as I obviously am a fan. I think there's some legitimate reasons why, in terms of being an attractive job, it is not. So I don't know if you want, I know you had a kind of a thing you wanted to bring up. Maybe we can kind of use that as kind of a starting point, but we're going to look at the different aspects or the elements, and starting with the quarterback situation. I'll kind of make my point. I've been a Kyler Murray fan for a long time. This last season, I kind of went on record and saying, as much as I'm a fan of the player, and I think he's kind of been unfairly criticized, I think everyone needs kind of a fresh start. I think he needs to go somewhere else where he'll get a fresh start. I think the Cardinals need to start from scratch with maybe a more conventional type of quarterback. So what you've got, the quarterback situation for the Cardinals, that is kind of a deterrent in terms of it being an attractive job, is a unresolved quarterback situation with a quarterback with a big contract. That it's not an atypical contract. It is a typical kind of second contract for a quarterback. But, there are cap ramifications that we're going to talk about later. Mm-hmm. So if you're a coach looking at this, like, oh boy, like, what's going on with the court? Unless you want to work with Kyler Murray, right? Unless you are all in on Kyler Murray, that's not an attractive situation. And then you add to that, sure, we have the third overall pick, but there is not a second quarterback worth taking that early. And even the number one overall presumed pick, there are people who question if he's, is he really worth taking first overall? But that's going to happen, right? So you're coming in here figuring if you're a coach, you're looking at this job like you either have to roll with Kyler Murray, who's been injured and there's some question marks, but the outside perception is that he's on his way out, or you need to have a bridge quarterback, and then in your second year, hope you're in a position to draft your quarterback. But if you're a coach, you're looking at your future with an organization is very much tied to your quarterback situation. With all the uncertainty, this is not a great or attractive quarterback situation for a new coach to come in on. Yeah.
So I went through here, and I kind of want to explain what I did so that people can read this. So I got Kyler Murray, quarterback. Like you mentioned, we're going to talk about his future here in a little bit. But I also wanted to kind of highlight the young stars on each team. And maybe the Cardinals, maybe there's some guys I missed, but
but that's okay.
Probably some guys I missed on the Browns too. But I was thinking Michael Wilson, Will Johnson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride's the big one, I think. Mm-hmm. But another point that you talked about ahead of the show before we came in here was Cardinals are in the NFC West. Mm-hmm. And their total division record was 41-27. And the Seahawks aren't coming down anytime soon. Rams have shown they know how to rebuild. And then the 49ers have been winning games with third stringers all season. So Kyle Shanahan knows what he's doing. That's a hard division to win in. Cleveland Browns, I don't know who their quarterback is. No one knows who their quarterback is. They finished the season with Shedeur Sanders. So I threw Shedeur Sanders in there. Deshaun Watson's coming back. Maybe it's him, but they've got a mess there. The AFC North is a lot easier of a division right now. The Bengals, the Browns, and I believe the Ravens all finished with losing records. I'm going to double check that because there at the end, it got kind of crazy.
When you have two new coaches too.
That's true.
Right?
Yep. Well, three new coaches.
Including the Browns, right? Yeah.
Right.
Including the Browns. Are the only one who didn't.
Yeah. Zach Taylor forever. But I really liked this last draft class that they had. They had a lot of guys that I wanted the Bengals to take. Carson Schwessinger, who is going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Harold Fannin Jr., Quinshawn Judkins, Mason Graham. I think they have a lot to build around, but it's that quarterback situation.
Mm-hmm.
So these are very similar teams, but I don't know that the Browns or the Cardinals, excuse me, have as much to kind of bring in. Whereas, the Browns have Myles Garrett. The Browns do have these big, flashier names than I think the Cardinals do. But maybe I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong.
Yeah, so let me, and I kind of was focusing on quarterback, but let me talk a little bit. You mentioned the division, right? I mean, 3 of the 4 top NFC playoff teams, right? The 3 of the final 4 were our division, right?
Right.
And 2 in the NFC championship game. That's crazy tough, right? The young stars, so they have a lot of good young players that have a lot of potential. You listed some important ones here. They haven't made the Pro Bowl, but they got guys who are on the cusp of being really good. So Michael Wilson, former 3rd-round pick, just really established himself as a guy. You looked at him and thought, okay, this is kind of a guy who's kind of your number 2 receiver. And, he was a guy who was getting 600, 700 yards, receiving this season. And then, when Jacoby Brissett came in and the second half of the season, he just really established himself and was one of the top receivers in the league down that stretch statistically, and has just shown that he can be your number 1. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. has been disappointing. We'll talk about that with Petzing. How much of that is Harrison? How much Petzing? Obviously, McBride is arguably the best tight end in football. But there's some guys on the defensive side that we haven't kind of talked about. Will Johnson, the guy they drafted in the 2nd round, who played really well. He missed some games here and there, but he's a really promising cornerback who could be our cornerback 1. Garrett Williams, he got injured, unfortunately, but he's our slot cornerback, and he was the 4th highest graded cornerback last year per PFF. Quietly a really great young cornerback. So you've got guys like that, Josh Sweat, who we signed as a free agent. The 3rd overall pick, is probably not going to be a quarterback. We might be bringing in Bain or an edge rusher. Walter Nolan, had some injury issues, but really looked good when he was healthy. So there are some guys like that. And then some other guys that they drafted a little bit later that look like solid depth role player guys. So there's a lot of young talent that the right coach can come in, especially on the defensive side, and can really, you've got some guys that are in year 2 or 3 that are ready to take a step with the right coaches. And then you've got, Paris Johnson Jr., the left tackle. You've got a solid franchise left tackle. You need some help on the offensive line. But there are some pieces here, like the Browns, some nice young pieces. It's a very young roster, a lot of draft picks. Unfortunately, we had a crazy amount of injuries this year, which means that next coach that comes in can really work with that. But the thing I didn't bring up, which really deters the Cardinals, is the ownership. Michael Bidwell, notorious, kind of cheap owner, has, moved on from coaches. There's also been some reports that he's not great to work for or work with, just how he treats people. There's enough question marks, and people talk around the league. So when you're a coach, and this is something I really want to mention, I think people don't always think about this. When you're a coach, people say a coach should take on whatever challenge. If you're not willing to take on a challenge, you're not confident enough. And I think that's kind of BS. You're pragmatic, and coaches don't get a 3rd chance. You know what I'm saying? If you're a head coach and you didn't like Robert Saleh, right? You had a bad situation. He's got a 2nd chance, but you don't get a 3rd chance. Right. Typically, you get a 3rd job if you've been good, right? A guy like Andy Reid, if he wanted to leave, would, but if you kind of weren't successful in your first job, you might get a 2nd chance. You don't get a 3rd one. So anyone who is on their 2nd chance and didn't succeed in their first chance is taking a big risk with this Cardinals job, right? A first-time coordinator might be better off waiting for a better job, but some of them might take the chance because it is one of 30, 2 jobs, right? Mm-hmm. So all that plays in. This really matters. And I don't, talent-wise, I think the Cardinals have a lot of pieces to work with. I like our general manager, but the situation ain't great.
Yeah, and I I think that's a really good point. And Robert Saleh is someone who I was actually surprised that he took that Titans job.
Yeah.
Because that organization has I looked it up. They haven't had consistency with their GM and coach since 2021. They're constantly moving. They're constantly changing. They fired Mike Vrabel after like one bad season, maybe two bad seasons, after they traded away all of his pieces. I mean, they do not have a ton of time. And yes, they have what is it, 100 million in cap or something, but that's a lot to kind of put on. You've got this unknown with Cam Ward. And, the Cardinals position, they have the Kyler Murray thing that shakes things up. We'll get into that here in a minute. But I believe you guys have about 27 million in cap right now.
We have some moves. We have some moves we can make to clear it up. But yeah.
But you have pieces, but you're definitely working with a lot of potential as well. And then having that Kyler Murray kind of thing hanging over your head and how much money you could end up losing from that's really scary if I'm a coach coming in as even as a first timer and don't know what my situation is going to be. At least in Cleveland, at the very least, I know that I kind of can start Shedeur Sanders. He's on a rookie contract. If he fizzles out, it's not that big of a thing. You also have Dylan Gabriel on a rookie contract because they decided to screw up their perfect draft and do that. But I think the quarterback situation is drastically different in Arizona than what it is in Cleveland because of that rookie versus veteran contract.
I actually don't think that's as because I think there's a cap hit, but there's a big deal where like if he's on March there's a certain date in March where if he's on the roster, some of that money's guaranteed, but they move off of him before that. The dead cap hit isn't as bad, and so I don't think the cap situation is the bigger issue with Kyle. They'll take a dead cap hit, but they can get out for it. It's not as bad as it would have been last year. They've got the cap room. They can make some moves. They've got some guys that they can cut who will save them cap space, who aren't guys that have been injured, guys that have not been a factor that we're not going to miss, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the bigger issue with quarterback isn't so much the cap hit as much as there isn't a good plan for how to replace him.
Okay.
Jacoby Brissett is under contract, and he's a great bridge quarterback. So you can roll with him if you build a good defense, put the pieces there. You can win some games with him, but you're not going to be a contender with him. You still have to have your next plan. And because it's not a good quarterback draft, it's the next plan that is such a kind of an uncertain. I think they can absorb the cap situation and still have some money to work with. It's just who do you replace him with is the bigger issue.
Yeah. Let's move on to that conversation. Let's talk about Kyler Murray. What's going on over there? These numbers are according to ESPN. So if they're wrong, blame ESPN. But Kyler Murray's future in Arizona as a starter, he's 38, 48 and 1. He's a free agent in 2029, but he has an out after 2027 written into his contract. Mm-hmm. He has $49.835 million guaranteed in 2026 because that March deadline did hit in 2025 that brings it around. Pre-June 1st cut, you would have $57.81 million in dead cap. If you cut him after June 1st, he's $50.2 million in 2026. The rest of that dead cap is in 2027, so about 7.6. And then you would save $2.7 million, so you could sign like a kicker or something. But
yeah, and like in March there's this thing. If he's on the roster in March, it triggers a $19.5 million of his 27 base guarantee is guaranteed. So if they trade him or cut him before that, it's not as bad. So that there is that trigger that's a big factor. And I don't know how accurate these numbers are. Man, I'll tell you, you go to different cap sites, sometimes it's a little tricky. Spotrac, one of the places, I'm sorry, my dog is barking because someone's at my door. Yeah. So anyway, like if they trade him, there's there's some different, I think.
These are the trade numbers here for.
Yeah, I think it's not as bad. And I think, again, I'm not a capologist, so it gets a little tricky. But I think they have enough other moves that they can make that I think they can work around that, especially with how many guys they have on rookie deals, such a young roster. So I think you can absorb that. But to me, the bigger question is, what are they going to do with him, right? The money's kind of messy, but it's workable in their situation. The question is, do they move on from him or do they keep him? And the sentiment has been that they're going to move on from him. And I, as much as I've been a fan, do favor that because injuries and, like I said, I think he needs a fresh start. But so much of that comes down to who the next coach is. If the next coach wants to run with him and Brissett and does not want to have to worry about their quarterback situation for the next year or two, and figures we'll run with it, and we don't have to extend him beyond these next 2 years, and figure out from there. If the coach wants him, then they'll make it work. If they don't, then I think they're going to pull the Band-Aid off and try to and make some other cuts and try to get this roster as close to winning as possible. So I think I would lean towards him being out because of that bonus or that guarantee money of March. And the ownership and GM have been non-committal on his future, which, is if they're not, even if they do say that you're their guy, that doesn't always mean something, but the fact that they're non-committal is kind of concerning.
Right. And this is really, a good period to trade him. This draft for quarterbacks sucks. Like I'm in Indiana. Love Fernando Mendoza. There's going to be a bunch of children named Fernando this year, I'm sure. But I don't know how ready he is for the NFL. He's going to be the first overall pick, very likely. Maybe Arvell Reese, maybe the Raiders take shake things up, go crazy with it. But Fernando Mendoza is very likely the first overall pick. After that, now that Dante Moore is pulled out, it's Ty Simpson maybe. And if you're a team like the Jets, that I'm thinking of the Jets specifically right now, and I know they've been tied to Kyler a lot. Maybe you trade for Kyler. I just texted Stan, the Jet fan, to ask his thoughts on it because he isn't here right now. But I think that you could get a lot for Kyler Murray this year, even with his decently sized contract, just because there's a lot of teams looking for a young quarterback that aren't going to find it in the draft.
Yeah. I don't think you're getting a ton as much as I wish. You're not getting multiple first-round picks. You might get a late first-round pick. Definitely good, I think. Well, I should say definitely, but I think good chance you could get a second-round pick because of what you're talking about, right? Because of the draft you're not going to find that guy in the draft. Yeah.
What do you think has been Kyler's issue? Because Kyler's a former, top pick, top prospect, top guy. What kind of happened that does he have a chance of resurging, or is this just who he is?
I've talked about and thought about Kyler Murray a lot, and I've generally been an apologist for him. I think some of the criticisms have been unfair. He has limitations. Most quarterbacks do. People seem to forget that, but he does have limitations. So let me start kind of with the issues. As cliche as it is, the height does matter, especially over the middle of the field, seeing intermediate stuff. Like he can see the field, but there's just these 10% less visibility with being blocked by the offensive line, right? And that little bit is enough to make a difference. He's still been effective because of the raw talent and the things he can do with his legs. But if you're looking for a guy who can just dissect, diagnose, and pick apart of the field in front of him as a pocket passer, he has limitations. So that's hurt him. It seems like he's been a first read or scramble guy, right? And some people want to make that about practice or study habits. I actually think it's more a vision thing. I think because he can't see, it's harder to go on to the next read. So if he doesn't get his first read, he has to kind of make room, scramble or make time and extend the play, which he can do really well. he can, when things break down, he can do things that other people can't. But other quarterbacks like Brissett in that same situation sits in the pocket a little longer and then gets the ball out. Kyler can't do that as well. So you can work with that. Like if you could build an offense where it's much more rollouts and bootlegs and take advantage of that, you could do some things with that. But if you're needing him to be a pocket style passer, which I think they tried too much to do, it didn't work so well, right? So I think there is a style, there's kind of a system kind of element that has some limitations. I think he works hard, tries hard, cares. I don't think the character things have been fair criticisms of him. That's my opinion. I think he's a little aloof, but I don't think he's a bad kid. But I think it's more that system thing. But he has obviously elite leg talent and elite arm talent. He can make throws that only a handful of quarterbacks can make. It's more the processing the field in front of him, and I think that's more a vision thing. So he needs to be in the right system. He can make the big plays, but you get the right system where you are a defensive team that runs the ball a lot, and you don't need him to be your Joe Burrow, right? You just need him to be that, just to hand that ball off and make some plays here and there, but the run game and the defense are going to carry your team. You could be really successful with him, right? Especially if you leverage the run, but that's kind of his limitations. But I think he's I think he's one of the 15 to 20 best NFL quarterbacks.
Okay.
Yeah.
As he's getting older, and he's only 28, he's not like ancient by any means, but that mobility will start to go as he's older. Mm-hmm. So what do you say to people who bring that up as a concern?
You're right. It potentially, right? Now, some quarterbacks, Mike Vick played reasonably long. He had obviously interrupted, but he had a resurgence, right? Russell Wilson, has kind of fall lately, but he played a while, right? So I don't know that it falls off as quickly as you think. And in part, Kyler's fast, but he's also quick and agile. So, he's not going to be, watch him prove me wrong, but he's not going to be, Joe Flacco, 40 something still playing, but I don't think he's going to fall off once he hits 30 necessarily. You might see a little bit of a draw off that, but but he is limited, right? And if you're looking for a guy for the next couple of years, like the Jets, while you're trying to get someone else, that in that situation, I think it could be really good, right? Okay.
There you have it, folks. New York Jets fans that follow us. That's could be your future quarterback. We've got some comments about possible Cardinals coaching hires, so we can get into that. Chris Vikings 30, he's always commenting on our videos. He's doing a little bit of trolling here.
Yeah.
I think this one might be legit. He said Cardinals should hire Raheem Morris for head coach. Do you want to give your quick thoughts on that?
I don't want to totally dump on him. It seems like he's a good dude and good coach, but he's had a couple chances and it doesn't excite me. Right. There are other names that I'm much more intrigued by. And, the Cardinals interviewed him and he's in the running, but I think, and because we may not have the choice of the guys we want, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but there's another name that you and I are going to talk about that I think is more likely, may not be any more exciting, but more likely as the retread type.
Okay. And then, he did say this as well. Bengals should get Kyler Murray after they save Burrow and trade him to the Vikings. So he's clearly a Vikings fan. I think he has commented that under every video, even ones that don't have to do with the Vikings or the Bengals. So
yes,
there you go, Chris. You made it into the video. But let's talk about, you sent me your coaching names that you liked, so we can talk about those right now. And you sent me to them in three or four different categories, and kind of had a representative of each category. So if you just want to go kind of down the list and kind of explain each one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I kind of identified these category types of coaches, and not always my favorite, but the ones that are most intriguing to me. We've got, Anthony Campanelli, the Jags defensive coordinator, who kind of represents the defensive coordinator, first time head coach. Obviously Jesse Minter just was hired by the Ravens. You mentioned he's that type, right? There's some other guys, right? Shula. There's some other defensive coordinators out there who are like that. This is the one I find intriguing. He's really done a good job turning around the Jaguars defense. They were 27th ranked scoring defense and brought them up to 8th. There's a viral video going around of him being just kind of very charismatic and fiery. That's really influenced a lot of people. So if you're going, this new defensive coordinator who's going to turn things around, that is a guy who I think is intriguing. Certainly, again, there's other names in that, but he's a guy who's on my radar. Then you've got someone who is like not a regular offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, but is a player at another position. A coach at another position that, is that you're considering, certainly in your division. You look at Mike Tomlin was not a defensive coordinator when they hired him, right? So you have those kinds of guys that are maybe a little different position than the offensive defensive coordinator. That's Thomas Brown. He's the Patriots passing game coordinator. And I'm intrigued by him because, they talk about him and Drake May and all he's done there. But if you look at his coaching resume, he's coached running backs and other positions. And I look at him, and what's intriguing to me is that he's sort of a guy who is not like the cliche quarterback whisperer or even cliche, offensive wunderkind who has this crazy, Mike McDaniel or whatever, but more like a guy who I wonder and think of as maybe a guy who builds a holistic offense. And if you're the Cardinals and your quarterback situation's uncertain and you don't want to be so focused on trying to develop a quarterback who's not even in your building yet, I'm intrigued by this guy because he can work on building an offensive system and building, on our receivers and our tight end and build a system that the next quarterback can step into. And so that just kind of more holistic approach is intriguing to me. Then we get to kind of the first-time head coach offensive coordinator, right? And Mike LaFleur, the Rams offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak's another name in there, all kind of interesting, certainly, but you've got a guy here who comes from, the Shanahan tree, and has been under, that Rams offense is coached there. That's just really, really been impressive. He has some history working with rookies, developing like Garrett Williams and Puka Nacua. So this is that, kind of cliche offensive, young offensive mind that I would be intrigued by. And then finally we get to the retreads, right? And Vance Joseph I've got here is the intriguing name, not because he's my favorite. I think that a lot of Cardinals fans would hope we could land Sean McDermott. I don't know that he's going to be interested in the Cardinals job. I think he might hold out for something better. Vance Joseph was our defensive coordinator under Cliff Kingsbury. He's known in the building. The word is, the ownership likes him and knows him. And, he's not the most exciting name. And in fact, a lot of Cardinals fans, because we know him and, just like, having bad memories from the Cliff Kingsbury era. But certainly he's reestablished himself as a coaching candidate. And he's like the betting odds on favorites right now, I believe. And he's the name. If you said, okay, you have to pick one name that you think is the most likely guy to end up being the coach, this is probably the name because the familiarity with the ownership, he's willing to come here, unless he gets a job somewhere else, it seems like. They know him, they like him, and they may not have many better options because of what we talked about earlier with it not being the best job, right? So this may be like a lot of Cardinals fans will be very disappointed. I don't hate it as much as other fans do, but I'm not excited about it either. But this might be where we end up landing. So I would love to see us land one of these coordinators who just decides to take a shot with their first job, and we catch lightning in a bottle with a young, exciting coach like a LaFleur or Campanelli. But we might not be able to land one of those guys.
Yeah, and I don't think either one of those guys needs to leave either.
Yeah.
Like they're not being pushed out. Campanelli is definitely not being pushed out of Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
Michael LaFleur may want to, kind of spread his wings a little bit since he's seeing what his brother's doing up in Green Bay. Maybe
might want to wait for a better job.
That's true. Yeah.
Which Ben Johnson did that, right? And It worked out.
I know Silverwolf, I don't know if he's still in here, but he said that he would personally move Sean McDermott to Arizona. So on one of our videos. So
Yeah. Listen, the Cardinals fans would, and I think he'd be a really great stabilizing force. But listen, I think this Cardinals division is so tough, like we talked about. You could do everything right and still finish third place for the next 2 or 3 years. It's just so tough. So, like, my realistic expectations is I'd love to see us be a playoff contender, but let's see if we can just raise the floor and be consistent. Like if we could raise the floor and be competitive and even if we don't make the playoffs for a couple more years, I know I would be disappointed, but like realistically, I don't. It's going to be so tough to win this division or even get a wild card spot in this division. Let's get someone in here who builds us to respectability, if nothing else.
Now he's adding shovel his driveway. So
that's all that shoveling you have to do in Arizona, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say he's so kind.
Yeah.
At his Buffalo home, walk his dog, personal shopper, etc. Man, Silverwolf is
get
adding
his dry
stuff.
cleaning.
He's negotiating against himself, I think. So,
well, I appreciate what he's negotiating on behalf of us Cardinals fans. Take that for take that responsibility for. So, it would be he could build the stability, but like I tweeted this out, I think a while back too. Like the Cardinal, it's been a while since the Cardinals have been good on either side of the ball, like really good. If we can just get even if we get a guy who I'm not excited about, someone like Vance Joseph or whatever, and they can come in and build a really good defense, and we can just try to figure out what to do on offense to get enough points. That's it. I want better, but I'll take that if that's the best I can get because it's just been terrible, like what we've had lately, right? Like even last year or the year, when they had the 8 wins, they did that, but like they didn't have either side of the ball like a top 10 unit, right? Build us a top 10 defense, right? Build us an elite defense, draft, develop the guys we've got, build us an elite defense. We'll figure out enough on it. We've got some players on offense. We'll get enough on there, and let's at least be respectable and then see if we can get the quarterback in there and take that next step from there. But we haven't even been that yet.
Yeah. So of these guys that you've kind of listed, who is your favorite? You talked about Vance Joseph a lot, but you said you're not super high on.
Yeah, maybe LaFleur because bringing in that offensive mind, like there's been a lot of success in the league with bringing in that kind of guy. And, certainly in Seattle, you see what they've done. You've seen it with the Vikings, right? Listen, even Mike McDonald or McDaniel, who was fired from the Dolphins, like he still built a really good offense. And if they had a quarterback who wasn't always getting injured and he might still have that job there. So even though he got fired, like those guys come in, those offensive guys, and they have success, right? So that's probably would be my first choice of those guys. If you could get a guy who's more established like McDermott, I'd take that. But probably the offensive kind of, Robert Saleh was actually a guy I really wanted before he got hired, but LaFleur, I would probably say of that list is probably my first choice.
And he's in your division, so he's familiar with these defenses already. He's played against, Robert Saleh has obviously moved on, but he's played against that 49ers defense. He's played against Mike McDonald's defenses. So he's got some familiarity game planning for them. So that could be an advantage as well.
For sure.
I think Thomas Brown is interesting as well because
he's high on my list too. Yeah.
He was the guy who, when Eberflus got fired, he took over as the interim head coach in Chicago.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have a ton of experience, but he was entrusted with that for at least a few games. I don't know how much credit you want to give him for that, but it's something, I think. I think it shouldn't go overlooked.
Yeah, for sure. So he's got some experience being that guy, right? And like, if it's almost for me, almost more like 1A, 1B with him and LaFleur. LaFleur is more the kind of the conventional offensive coordinator guy, but I am so intrigued that if you tell me we got Thomas, I'd be happy. Thomas Brown. So
Is it Mike, Thomas, and then Vance, I assume?
Actually probably more Campanelli.
Campanelli's in there before Vance.
Yeah,
just
I don't dislike Vance Joseph as a coach as much as some fans do, but I'm not excited about it. It's more one of those things where I'm like, if we can't land a guy that I'm excited about, and we end up with Vance Joseph, who I think it's going to be, I think he's going to be better than fans think he will be, but I'm not excited about it.
Okay, that's fair. Well, let's talk about one of your former coaches.
Yes.
Former offensive coordinator, and I got to be honest, I'd heard his name thrown around on Twitter. I knew who he was, but I don't know a lot about his schemes and stuff. So I'm going to be doing some learning here too. Offensive coordinator, newly for the Lions, Drew Petzing.
Mm-hmm.
I asked you to describe his game a little bit because I don't know much about him. And I've had multiple Lions fans ask me, who the heck is this guy? We've never even heard of him. And I think part of that is because Mike McDaniel was kind of the betting favorite to go to the Lions. I think he would have been awesome with the Lions. He's now with the Chargers, and they brought in Drew Petzing. So, first of all, is Drew Petzing a good offensive coordinator? That's the question Lions fans want to know.
Kind of, but no. It's complicated. So you have to bear with me. I talk in stories. It's the teacher in me. So, he came through the Vikings and then to the Browns, right? Before he came to Arizona, he was a quarterback's coach with the Browns, and Gannon brought him, and they had ties together. They brought him as the offensive coordinator. And, when you came in, he was kind of the Stefanski, Gary Kubiak kind of coaching tree. You figured it was a wide zone offense, kind of running game. And he ended up actually doing something like not just wide zone. I've heard people who know much more than I do about schemes and such talk about his running scheme and his running kind of game as very innovative and very diverse, not just one type of thing. Ran the most different types of run plays, I think, in the league, or one of the most. A lot of 13 personnel, so, heavy tight ends, but moving them around, doing interesting things. And when he has the right personnel, his run game is really impressive. It at least has been. Now, there's been a lot of Cardinals fans who have talked about how Clayton Adams, our offensive line coach, left to the Cowboys, became the offensive coordinator, and things fell off. And a lot of people give him the credit for what was going on in run game, which might be. We also, though, had a lot of injuries, like our top two running backs and some offensive line. So it could be that. So he has the potential to be a really good run game type of offensive coordinator. And if you're the Lions, you could be excited about that because you have Jahmyr Gibbs, right? And was it Singleton? Or who's the other guy?
Singletary, but he might be on the trade block. So
okay, but you still have Jahmyr Gibbs, and you'll bring in a guy to be, the complement. It's like you have the personnel, and you have in Detroit one of the best offensive lines in the league, right? If not the best. So like for that personnel, I think he will help them to be a very dominant run game. So I would be excited about that. The critiques, though, have to do with his route trees, like not like his passing concepts and route trees being maybe kind of simplistic and not and not slow developing. And that the passing game, a lot of Cardinals fans have really been down on him, feeling like he's a lot of the reason Marvin Harrison Jr. has disappointed. They really blame it a lot on him. I don't know if that's fair. It's hard to know. But there have been a lot of questions about his passing side of things that questionable on that. But also there have been questions just about his actual play calling, maybe kind of panicking in some play calls. There were some plays that were like he called a play that he even acknowledged was in a tight situation was not the right play, a good play to call. Being kind of rigidly adherent to his system and kind of scripts. There's so many times where I've been watching a Cardinals game and it's 3rd and long in a situation. It's like, yeah, of course you run a draw there because that's what we need. And I sarcastically, right? Mm-hmm. There's just been so many times where you needed to pass the ball that you ran with him. So the biggest questions are about his passing game and his play calling. But his system in the running side of things is viewed as innovative, and the Lions have good personnel. So I think if what they are wanting to do is really lean into being a run heavy team, and maybe Goff can help make the difference as a veteran quarterback who's got some success in the league, and the receivers that maybe they can make it work better. It could work. Cardinals fan, I will tell you this though, Cardinals fans were out on Drew Petzing before they were out on Jonathan Gannon. He was the guy that, like, as someone who follows Cardinals and sees what the fans say, and kind of has a little bit of a finger on the pulse of what the fans are saying through all of social media and such, like, fans were out on Petzing before they were out on everyone else, except some, the Kyler Murray was polarizing. Some people were out of Kyler Murray years ago, right? But Drew Petzing was the first guy people were out on, citing the issues I talked about and what Marvin Harrison Jr. not developing the way we'd wanted. So Cardinals fans are very down on him. It's hard to find a Cardinals fan who's a Petzing fan.
Okay. And I misspoke. David Montgomery is the running back in Detroit. Yeah. So before someone gets me in the comments, I just want to say
you can blame it on me because I gave the wrong name first.
But yes, David Montgomery is possibly going to be traded, but he is currently still in Detroit. So that's interesting that you mentioned that he was kind of blamed for the passing game going away, because I don't know if you saw, Amon-Ra St. Brown came out in defense of Petzing and kind of like what they're doing in Detroit. He said, like, so many of these fans and people don't know what they're talking about. They don't know football. Yeah. And if I'm Amon-Ra, and this isn't a critique, but maybe I'm looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. and saying he kind of fell off under Petzing. Is that going to happen to me? So it's interesting to see that the wide receivers are the ones that are kind of jumping to his defense.
And I don't know if it'd be fair to say that Marvin Harrison fell off as much as he failed to develop.
Okay.
But we don't know if that's Petzing or Marvin Harrison Jr. or both, right? That's the tough part. So Michael Wilson, at least second half of the season, thrived. Is that more the quarterback, right?
True.
Situation. So it's hard to know.
And Trey McBride thrived in the passing game too, as a tight end. But.
Yes. Yeah. But again, I do think some of the critiques are legit, especially the panicked play calling and the questionable, like with offensive coordinators and play callers. You've got your system, which is what are the routes like, how did it develop, what are the concepts, and then you've got your sequencing, the actual calls you choose to make, right? The plays that you call. And I think the bigger critiques are on the play calling, but there are some critiques on the system on the passing side. But again, listen, I'm not an X and O's guy, and Amon-Ra St. Brown knows much more about football than I will ever know. So maybe he sees things I don't, or maybe he's just coming to the defense of his new coach because that's what you do. It's hard to know.
So I know that Lions fans are going to be a little, kind of rear back when they hear that his play calling might be questionable, because that was one of the issues they had with John Morton.
Yeah.
And Dan Campbell ended up taking away play calling from John Morton in like October, I think, or something like that, or late 2025, something. And do you think that could happen again with Petzing? Because Campbell's shown a willingness to do that.
I mean, I don't think he's going to out the gate try to do that. And in fact, I've been critical of Petzing in the past, not as harshly as some Cardinals fans. I'm a little more tempered on it. I actually think he might have some success there because of how good the offensive line is, because of how good the running game is going to be. They're going to run the ball well, and what Petzing does well is going to work really well. And because they have such an established veteran quarterback who has kind of connections with his receivers, like whatever Petzing's deficiencies are, the Lions could be well positioned to offset that, right? They're going to be just so damn good running the ball that it almost might not matter. And you've got a veteran quarterback who's been there for years. who will know how to make, and he'll work with Petzing, and maybe some coaches can get better and develop. Maybe being in there in this new with Dan Campbell and with working with Goff in the room, they adjust the scheme to things that Goff likes, and you get some shifts, and it ends up working. I could see that. Absolutely see that. And if nothing else, the run game is going to be good. Brissett made some things happen even despite the system. Now there were some issues still, but like, it's amazing how much having the right personnel can really make a big difference, right? So yeah, I could see it being successful, right? But do be aware of those critiques, right? Those I think those are worth noting, but maybe the situation is so much better that it ends up working fine.
All right. I know Detroit fans are still going to be hesitant hearing that, but it sounds like you're telling them to be cautiously optimistic.
There's I can see a way it works.
Okay.
I can see a version of the future where it works.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sitting down with me here. I know you've got another show on your channel you've got to do here soon, correct?
Yeah, I think about a little bit less than an hour. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to make sure, respect your time and everything. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we kind of wrap this up? I don't know if he froze. I think he froze. Well, that's that. We'll see if he pops back on here, but thank you everyone for hopping in. I appreciate every single one of you who took the time to comment. Joe, I think he might be back. We got him back? No. Okay. I appreciate everyone who took the time to comment, hop on in here. Let us know your thoughts, join the conversation. You mean so much to the channel, to all of us who are trying to do things. Make sure to support the Cardinal Rule and, do all the proper things. Appreciate you too as well, Silver Wolf. Go head on over to his channel. He is going to be doing his own thing here in about an hour or so, like he said. And we will see you all again some other time. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts on today's conversation. And until next time, go do something nice for someone.